Common mistake SaaS founders make during the early stages of building their legal foundation, and how can they avoid it?
Okay, so what's I think something that is really important to mention here is that SaaS founders often underestimate how important law is, and they overestimate their own ability to address legal issues. Like I said, I think the number one thing
Yeah.
that founders, the mistake that they make with legal, they underestimate its importance and they overestimate their ability to navigate it. Legal is incredibly complex. I think another thing that people don't understand is there are lawyers who specialize in each area of law. So there can be a lawyer who specializes in corporate. With Incorporate, you can have lawyers who specialize in fundraising. You can have lawyers who specialize in M&A. There are lawyers who specialize in data privacy, GDPR, the various state regulations. And then I think a lot of founders, on the overestimation piece, they think that ChatGPT can take care of a lot of the legal issues. Someone just reached out to me yesterday and ChatGPT had done this like whole analysis and they're like super convinced that ChatGPT is right. And I'm like, I'm a lawyer. You're coming to ask me a question and you've used ChatGPT and I'm telling you that ChatGPT is wrong. And he's adamant. No, this is right. Oh, okay. If you think this is right, then go ahead. Yeah. It's not an exact answer. Let me give you like an exact answer though, because that's a general concept. But here's one specific thing. In the early stages of startups, what often happens is if there's co-founders, two co-founders, they won't enter into a co-founder agreement. They won't have any sort of contract related to their ownership, who does what in terms of the responsibilities, who's the CEO, who makes the decisions, how decisions are made, what equity percentages are going to be issued. This is called a bylaws, the bylaws agreement. Or if it's an LLC, it's an operating agreement. So a lot of founders won't have these sorts of things. It'll just be like a general conversation. Hey, you're a 50% owner. I'm a 50% owner. Let's go build this thing. And they typically won't get it into place until they have to. And when they have to is when they go to raise investment, if they do. When they go to raise investment, the investor will make them get all of these documents in place. Before that, what we see time and time again is these two founders won't enter a co-founder agreement, and then maybe 6 months goes by. And 6 months later, one co-founder stays up every night, does all the work, builds the product, sells the product, this and that. And the co-founder maybe does nothing. Like he thought that the startup idea was cool. He wanted to be a part of a startup, but maybe he thought he would be more committed to like actually working on the company and then just doesn't. So now one co-founder is incredibly upset at the other co-founder. The other co-founder won't admit that they're like doing nothing. Oftentimes, like one co-founder will go to another and be like, hey man, you're not doing anything. The other co-founder will be like, what do you mean I'm not doing anything? I'm like, I'm just as committed to this as you are. And I spend 24 hours a day working on this. How many hours a day do you work on it? So there'll be some sort of a dispute between the co-founders, whatever it is, whatever the dispute is. It often is what I just mentioned. It often is that like one person is very committed to it and the other isn't. And there's a big discrepancy between them in terms of what they're willing to give to the company. So now there's a dispute. They get in this big fight. And then one co-founder wants to keep building the company. He wants the other guy out. And then the other guy's, I'm a 50% owner of this company. But now he's a 50% owner of the company. He's done 0% of the work. He's going to do 0% of the work moving forward. Why should he be a 50% owner of the company? But because there wasn't a clear contract between the two of them that says, hey, you're the 50% owner, you're the 50% owner. And then there's something called a vesting clause. A vesting clause says that over a period of time, you will earn your 50%. You're not just going to be given your 50%. You have to earn your 50%, usually over a period of 4 years, month over month, usually with something called a cliff, which says that up until the cliff, which is 1 year, up until the 1 year mark, you're going to earn 0%. At the 1 year mark, you'll earn 1/4, and then it'll vest over a period of 36 remaining months. So that's probably one of the biggest mistakes that SaaS founders. I think another mistake that SaaS founders make is they start as LLCs. Do not start as a limited liability company. The reason is because that
Why?
2 reasons. The first reason is LLCs are not equipped to issue stock. They issue something called membership units. Only corporations are set up from like a legal technical mechanism to issue stock. Okay. That's one reason. Outside of that, the primary reason, and then I'll give you another secondary reason, but the primary reason, the majority of institutional venture capitalists will not invest in LLCs. They are most used to investing in corporations. And in fact, a lot of the mandate charters of the venture capital funds don't permit them to invest in LLCs because it threatens their tax status and for some of their limited partners. So they will not be permitted. They're not able to invest in LLCs. And so what often happens is the VC will make you convert from an LLC into a C corporation. Then you have to go pay extra fees to a lawyer, blah, blah, blah. The last reason is in the United States, there's something called QSBS, Qualified Small Business Stock. Qualified Small Business Stock says that at the time of exit, if you've held the stock of the corporation for at least 5 years, every founder who owns stock and has held it for 5 years will be exempt from capital gains tax for up to $10 million. So you're exempt from tax for up to $10 million at the time of sale of your company. That's huge. It's a lot of money. It's $10 million that you get to keep in your pocket. So
Yeah.
these are some of the mistakes.
Yeah, definitely. I think I do see a lot of those founder disputes on Reddit, especially. And yeah, people are venting about the issues with co-founders. And also, yeah, I think a lot of people do think that ChatGPT can be used instead of lawyers. However, I think if it can complement each other rather than a replacement, as it seems like a good first point of contact, like when you ask questions. But
For
if
sure.
it's wrong,
Yeah,
then it's good to
100%. I'm
definitely
a
speak
lawyer
to
and
a
I use
lawyer.
ChatGPT, so I'm not saying that it's not a great tool, but
Yeah.
yeah, like it's definitely a compliment for sure.
So what are the top 3 things that SaaS founders should prioritize when preparing for a merger and acquisition?
I think that it's incredibly important to put together the right advisory team. And so the top 3 things are talk to a really great broker or investment banker, talk to a really great accountant, and then talk to a really great lawyer. And actually, I'd also add, maybe even before that, talk to an exit planner as well, which is different than a broker. An exit planner, the difference between an exit planner and a broker, some brokers can act as exit planners, but an exit planner will take a look at your company and they will assess the areas of the company that need work so that you can achieve your target valuation. And it usually is something around making sure that the necessary like systems and procedures are in place, further adding team infrastructure so that the founder can remove themselves from the day-to-day operations of the company. Might be something like addressing churn or looking at those like key metrics to understand which metrics need to be optimized so that the target valuation that the SaaS founder wants, they can get. But yeah, I'd say that those three things, strictly from the legal perspective, the three things that a founder would need to focus on to prepare for mergers and acquisitions: optimize the contracts for mergers and acquisitions. I'd actually say they need to do that like from the very beginning, because the last thing that you want to do is have to renegotiate your contracts leading up to a merger and acquisition. It might put some of your most important contracts to go back to the renegotiating table at that time. It would just be quite challenging and puts your contracts at risk as well. So I would say optimize your contracts, prepare your data room. So set up a data room, get all of your legal documents in one place, see which ones are missing, draft the ones that are necessary and get them in there so that they don't come up during the actual M&A process. And then I'd say the third thing is, I just had it and then it slipped my mind. The third thing I would say, oh, yes, I remember. Come up with a narrative. So once you have your due diligence data room, come up with a narrative around, from the perspective of the buyer is going to look through this data room and they are going to find things that they don't like. They're going to find things that are going to be challenging conversations. They're going to find things that may make them question whether they want to purchase this business. And the seller should be prepared for those questions. Let me give you an example. A couple months ago, there was a buyer. They wanted to buy this business. We were representing the buyer. And we went to go take a look at the seller's data room. And I'll tell you, like, this is something that is very prevalent and it's unfortunate. Buyer goes to take a look at seller's data room and there's like almost nothing in the data room. Like data room's like almost empty. And we look at it and we're like, oh, that's weird. It wasn't completely empty. Like there was like a few things in there, but like the things that were in the data room were completely useless. It was like addendums to contracts. So it was almost like the seller saw the contracts and then took the most pointless part of the contracts and uploaded them to the data room. And our report to the buyer was like, this is very strange. This seller has some very important customers, some very large customers. They must have contracts with them because there's an addendum to the contract, but the contract itself is not in there.
Yeah.
So we go and tell the seller, or we go and tell the buyer goes to the seller and is like, hey, make sure you upload the actuals of the contracts, not just the addendums. We take a look at the contracts. The contracts say, in the event of a merger or acquisition, this contract is terminated. So immediately, our response to the buyer was, oh, the seller probably, he knew that's what the contract says. And that's why he didn't put it into the data room. Now it's such a small thing. So immediately the buyer is, oh,
Yeah.
that's strange. So trust is like so key during an M&A process. It's so key. The buyer and the seller have to like deeply trust one another. And these sorts of behaviors threaten the trust between the buyer and the seller. And the buyer ultimately ended up buying the company and it was fine. Ended up being fine. But yeah, that definitely impacted the way that the buyer viewed seller. And had there been other things that came up that were wrong with the company, these sorts of small fractures in trust eventually can kill a deal. Now, in this case, it didn't, as I mentioned, because outside of that, the seller ended up being very forthright. They had explained to the buyer, even before the contracts were in the data room, hey, these are our customers. there's this customer, we're not on good terms with them. So the seller had told the buyer that before. But if more things came up on top of that, it would seriously start to make the buyer mistrust the seller. And that's what you don't want to happen as a seller. Transparency, directness, coming up with a narrative, a plan, a strategy. You've thought about everything. You're laying it out all on the table for the buyer in good faith. So those are the three things that are most important for a founder to prepare for and may do.
Definitely transparency and trust. So it really seems like for you that contracts need to be drafted correctly from day one. But what if these SaaS founders are bootstrapping and they can't afford a lawyer?
In all seriousness, if they're bootstrapping, there's a website. It's called clerky.com. Clerky, Clerky. Okay. Clerky is a website that SaaS founders can go to. And it was started by these two lawyers who worked at a law firm called Gunderson. Gunderson is like one of the biggest law firms in the country. They're very famous in the world of startup law. I would say that the top three law firms in the world of startup law are Cooley, Wilson Sonsini, and Gunderson. Those are like the top three law firms in startup law. And Gunderson is famous because many years ago, they became quite famous for seed stage financings. Back then, like seed stage financings weren't really like a popular thing. There wasn't very delineated stages the way that there are now. Even today, the stages are changing. For example, Series A is becoming much larger. So over time, the startup market has matured. And so things have changed over time. Back then, seed stage financings were not really a thing. They weren't very popular. Gunderson became very famous for their work in seed stage financings. And these two Gunderson lawyers left to start this company called Clerky. For $800, you can get all of the documents that you will need in place to be able to go do a venture capital fundraise. Now, why is that important? Maybe you're thinking, oh, they're bootstrap founders. They don't want to raise capital. That's fine. But the reason why that's important is because that just shows that all the documents that need to be there will be there. If they are prepared to go raise VC, and all the documents that are there for them to raise VC that need to be there are there, that means that all of the foundational documents that are standard and that a VC will look for to feel comfortable that, oh, these people have done the legal legwork for me to be able to invest. It just because of the due diligence process. The venture capitalist is going to do due diligence. They're going to see, okay, are all the documents that protect my investment in place? That's why I'm using VC readiness as a standard. So for $800, Clerky will create all the documents for them that actually make them prepared to raise venture capital. So if they're bootstrapped, they just quit their jobs. They only have enough money to live for the time. They're pre-revenue. Save up, eat Chipotle for 3 weeks, save some money, put together $800, ask your grandma for $800. Like, whatever. Like, sell some meme coin or something. I don't know, whatever. Just find $800, go to Clerky, and you'll get a lot of your contracts that you need on the start incorporation side. Now, that doesn't include like your terms of service, your privacy policy, or anything like that. On that end, if they're pre-revenue, that likely means that they don't have customers yet. A lot of founders just go use the free terms of service generators. You really only need a robust terms of service once you start onboarding customers. So that's how.
So what legal documents or systems should SaaS founders have in place from the
Yeah.
beginning to avoid hiccups
So the
with
core
scaling or
foundational
exiting?
documents that SaaS founders are going to need: articles of incorporation, likely in Delaware, though a lot of companies are moving out of Delaware now because of the Elon Musk pay package court drama, where he had a very large multi-billion-dollar pay package that was issued to him via Tesla, and the shareholders tried to block it. There was like back and forth in the courts, and then the judge also blocked the pay package as well. A lot of companies now are moving out of Delaware. Dropbox just announced that they're moving out of Delaware. Facebook is likely going to be moving out of Delaware. A lot of companies are going to Nevada, Texas. Wyoming is another jurisdiction that I think a lot of companies go to, but let me tell you a story about Wyoming and like why jurisdiction of incorporation is so important. I have these two founders. They incorporated a company in Wyoming. They didn't ask me where I think they should incorporate. They just heard that Wyoming is a good place to go incorporate. And so they went and they incorporated in Wyoming. And it's not that Wyoming's a bad place to incorporate. Sure, the benefits of Wyoming: low incorporation fees, no taxes, this and that. Those are the benefits. They just went and they incorporated in Wyoming. 1 year later, they now are in a dispute and they don't want to be co-founders anymore. Which, by the way, they also downloaded their bylaws like off of some random website, and they entered into their bylaws, and like the percentages that they issued to themselves were incorrect. The bylaws say all these like random things, and for the last year, because they signed the bylaws and then immediately like just got into a dispute with one another, they haven't been able to fix their bylaws because they can't come to agreement on anything. That's why it's so important. Like, people are like, oh, I can always fix it later. Sure, you can always fix it later, except where something like this happens, where you can't agree anymore because you and your co-founder hate each other. And now you have these bylaws that don't say what you needed them to say, and you can't fix them. You're stuck. Anyway, they went in, they incorporated in bylaws. It gets even worse. They went in and they incorporated in Wyoming. And now there's a dispute. And one of the founders asked me, it's going to go to litigation. There's going to be a lawsuit over this company. And one of the founders asked me like, hey, can you refer me to a Wyoming litigator? And I like go to my network and I'm like, because I don't know any Wyoming litigators, because I would not recommend forming a company in Wyoming. So I go to my network and I'm like, hey, Wyoming litigators. Nothing. No one knows any Wyoming litigators. It's like very hard to find Wyoming litigators. You might be able to go on Google and find Wyoming litigators, but like getting a lawyer off of Google is obviously much less preferred than a referral that comes through where you know that the person who's been referred is a strong candidate for what it is that you're trying to do. This is why jurisdiction location matters. Because had it been Delaware has been the location for incorporation of corporations for hundreds of years, for a long time. So there's a very robust network of litigators available within my network that I know personally, so on and so forth. So now that there's a dispute, I would have been like, okay, go talk to this litigator. He's a good guy. He's a good gal. They'll be able to take care of you, so on and so forth. But with Wyoming, I'm like, I don't know anyone and I can't find anyone. Then that's not even to mention the fact that like you're going to have to deal with the Wyoming courts. Wyoming is a place of horse ranches and there's nothing there. So not only is there like an incredible shortage of litigators in Wyoming, but then once you actually even find your litigator, you're going to have to go deal with the judges in Wyoming, which is very different than a place like Delaware, which, as I mentioned, now obviously this thing with the pay package for Elon is upsetting corporations. But before that, like Delaware was the gold standard of the place to incorporate. Now, we don't know what the Wyoming judges would have done with that same pay package litigation, but at the same time, like, you want judges that like really understand the nature of corporation law. You don't want a judge who rules on disputes around horse ownership to determine the results of your litigation. So for that reason, corporation jurisdiction really matters. So they need their articles of incorporation. And I recommend when they form their company that in the articles of incorporation, they choose either 10 million shares or 100 million shares. 10 million is a standard, so is 100 million. It doesn't impact really anything, but you need to have a robust enough amount of shares. Like sometimes people will incorporate with 1 share or like 100 shares. You don't want to do that. You want to make sure that you have enough so that in the future, you'll likely still maybe have to amend your articles of incorporation. But if you incorporate with 100 million shares, you likely won't. If you incorporate with 10 million shares, you likely won't need to amend your articles of incorporation. You'll be able to issue enough shares to yourself, your co-founder. You'll be able to create an equity incentive plan and set aside a certain percentage of the equity for an equity incentive plan. So articles of incorporation, 10 million or 100 million shares, you need your bylaws, you need your stock purchase agreements for the founders, you need your 83B election, you need your board consents for the issuance of the stock and the adoption of the bylaws. You'll need you'll need IP assignments for the founders, which are also incredibly important documents for mergers and acquisitions. They will literally derail mergers and acquisitions if IP assignments, especially for the founders, are not in place and one of the co-founders leaves. If they leave on bad terms, there's not an IP assignment. Maybe that person was CTO of the company. They built the initial like code base for the company that the entire tech stack is built on, and there isn't an IP assignment for them. That will kill an M&A deal. IP assignments will absolutely kill M&A deals. You need to get IP assignments from anyone who ever creates anything for your company in the entire history of your company, because buyers will look for that and they will do significant amount of due diligence around that. So there needs to be IP assignments. If you have customers, there needs to be terms of service privacy policy. I would say that those are pretty much the core foundational documents. If you have a really unique brand name, I would suggest getting a trademark for the name of your company so that you can establish your IP portfolio. Yeah, I'd say those are all the pretty much, if you have those things, you will be set.
Very good checklist for founders to
Awesome.
think about when they start a company. So can you please share an example of a counterintuitive approach to structuring a deal that yielded unexpected
Counterintuitive
advantages?
approach to structuring a deal. It depends, right? So it depends on what kind of deal it is. I'm the type of person that I actually don't like really fancy structures, but I think that, from the perspective of a seller, actually, okay, here's the counterintuitive structure. Make it as simple as possible. Like, especially in an M&A deal, from the perspective of the seller, you'll have buyers that
Uh-huh.
come and they'll be like, okay, we're going to do a promissory note for this, and we're going to do a promissory note for this. And this promissory note is going to be contingent on this milestone being achieved. And then the second promissory note is going to make it so that both promissory notes are contingent on this other thing that happens. And if that doesn't happen, then you lose both promissory notes. So really complicated structures almost never are going to be in favor of the seller. So the counterintuitive approach is make it as simple as possible. Give me all the cash up front. Yeah.
That's very fair. That's very good advice. So how should SaaS startups adapt funding strategies?
Here's what SaaS founders shouldn't do. to prepare for venture capital in 2025. Just like slap some sort of AI function onto their technology and use buzzwords like synergy and AI all over their pitch deck and hope that gets them VC funding. That's what they shouldn't do. But what they should do to prepare is actually no different than any other year. And it doesn't matter whether the venture capital market is tight, whether it's flowing, whatever it is. SaaS founders, especially first-time SaaS founders, need to become expert capital raisers. They need to master the process of capital raising. Additionally, they should understand finance the same way a finance professional does. And what I mean by that is they should understand the nature of capital allocation. I hate this distinction. You're either a bootstrapper or you're VC backed. I don't think it's one or the other.
So what do you prefer instead?
I think that understanding the nature
Uh-huh.
of capital makes you a better entrepreneur. Bootstrappers love to be like, oh, I'll choose slow growth over giving away equity. Okay, do venture debt. Why does it have to be I'm going to suffer through bootstrapping for 15 to 20% growth in favor of holding up 100% of my equity, or I'm going to go raise venture capital? No. Capital is a tool that helps you grow. If you have a company and you're growing at 15 to 20%, wouldn't you rather grow at 200%? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe not. A lot of people would say maybe not. Maybe not because they like their slow growth at 15 to 20%. And they don't want to deal with the difficulties of 200%. But still, like, I don't think that I'm a bootstrapper or I'm VC backed. I think that is the wrong mindset to have. I think founders, especially first-time founders, should understand the use of capital as a tool, and specifically how to best allocate capital based on where they are because every SaaS founder has goals, right? They have goals, they have milestones that they want to achieve, and capital is a very useful tool to reach those goals. And so start thinking about capital more as a tool. There is various different types of capital. There's various different types of capital in terms of the requirements that the capital comes from. Like I mentioned, there's equity capital, there's debt capital, there's stage capital based on what stage you're in. So start thinking about capital as capital allocation and how to best allocate capital and become a master fundraiser. Think of capital the way that a finance person does, and get out of this like dichotomy mindset, bootstrap or venture capital. Utilize capital as a tool to help you achieve the next milestone. Always be building relationships with sources of capital. That's what I think that founders should be doing. And it's probably the number one advice I get. And I know some founders hate this. They hate hearing this. Oh, raising capital is like a full-time job. All I want to do is build product. All of the world's best entrepreneurs, when Elon went to go buy Twitter for $40 billion, you think he used his own money? No, he went to Larry Ellison and he was like, he sent Larry Ellison like a 2-line text message. He's like, hey, bro, I'm about to buy Twitter. Are you in? Larry Ellison was like, I'm in. You have to know the right people.
So you have to know the right people.
You have to know how to do it. Obviously, Elon is Elon, right? So anyone will give him their money. But if you're not Elon, before Elon became Elon, he had to learn how to raise capital. So you're not going to learn by sitting behind a computer screen. I'm not saying go do it as a full-time job for the next 10 years. I'm saying don't shy away. As a founder, I consider myself a founder, by the way, because I'm a 2X software founder. I founded 2 software companies, and I've actually founded the law firm is my 6th business. So I'm a founder and I consider myself to be. I hold myself to these same standards. This is the way that I operate as a founder. You got it. We have to do so many things. There's so many buckets. We have to work on many different things all at the same time.
Yeah.
So mastering capital and capital allocation and raising capital is one of those things that founders should optimize and learn and master.
So even if you consider yourself a bootstrapper, you should stop considering yourself a bootstrapper and learn how capital allocation works, and perhaps you can benefit from the
That's
variety of
exactly right.
different
Because the
sources of
worst
capital
place to
that you
be is
mentioned
needing
previously.
capital but not having access to it. And access to it when you need it is the worst time to need it.
Yeah. So what's a critical yet overlooked step that SaaS founders can take 3 years before planning their exit to maximum value?
A critical step that SaaS founders can miss is 3 years prior to exit is talking to an exit planner. I actually think that most SaaS founders don't utilize advisory resources enough. And I think that they don't actually even know that exit planners exist. And most founders, cost efficiency, whatever the reason is, they don't know that it exists. But yeah, utilize those advisors to prepare for the exit 3 years in advance.
Definitely. So what was a pivotal moment in your journey that solidified your passion for helping SaaS founders through M&A and growth?
I just have been a part of the software space for so long. It's been 10 plus years now. And I've had, I had friends that exited. I had friends that raised VC. I raised VC. I helped one of the like larger companies that I work for go through a private equity exit process. So I think the sum of all of those experiences has made me passionate about helping founders to exit, just because the exit is like such a revered goal. It's the place where founders can finally relax often, get paid for all of the work. And it's actually really seen as a badge of honor, I think. Like it's the equivalent of winning like an Olympic medal, but in business. It shows that a founder think at least I don't it's I don't know if I agree with it or whether it's true, but once you exit, it's so much easier, for example, to go and raise capital because investors look at the fact that you had an exit and that you generated returns. And they're like, oh, this person has a track record of success. So for that reason, I think that the exit process is like such an important part of the founder journey. And it's such a deep part of the founder journey as well. When I say deep, what I mean is it's not always easy for the founder. Yes, I think every founder thinks, oh, when the day comes when I get offered $100 million by Facebook to purchase my company, that's going to be me arriving to the promised land. But it often actually isn't like that. It's often deeply emotional for the founder. And no matter the amount of money, it can be challenging. Either it can be challenging because the founder is like tired of building the company and this thing that they worked so many years on, now they're giving away. It can be challenging because the founder feels deeply emotionally connected to this thing that they've built. It can be deeply challenging for a lot of different reasons on the emotional sides. It's such a human process. It's such a human process. And I think that's what draws me to M&A more than anything else.
Definitely. I think, yeah, I've never considered how deeply the emotional aspect is. Yeah, I think you're completely right about that. It's almost like giving away a part of you, right? Because you worked with it for years. Even if you get paid for it, it still
Yeah,
feels
like
like
kids going to
you're kind of like
college or
departing from
something like
something.
that. Maybe even.
You've emphasized the importance of relationships in M&A. How do you consciously foster trust
Well,
during
I think
these
transparency is
negotiations?
probably one of the keys. Transparency, preparedness. I'd say that those two things are key. A really great book for people who are interested in high stakes negotiations is called Start with No by Jim Camp. He's the founder of the camp negotiation system. Actually, if you've ever read the book Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. Yeah. So that book, Chris Voss is a
Reddit.
student of Jim Camp's. And what Chris essentially did was he took Jim Camp's system and he like used different parts of it for his negotiation system. So you'll see a lot of similarities between the two. But I actually start with no a little better because Chris Voss's book, Never Split the Difference, it gives you like a bunch of like tools that you can use, labels, mirroring, accusation audit, whatever. How do you expect me to do that? Or like the late night FM DJ voice. How do you expect me to do that?
Yeah.
But the Jim Camp system it's more of a system. It's more of a comprehensive system. It's more of a think about it, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. So that's a really great book. But in a high stake negotiation, I think the 3 things that I utilize the most are transparency, pairedness, and then humor. Humor is like such a powerful tool in negotiations, and it's such a rare and because of its rarity makes it even that much more powerful, because I think a lot of people are just like nervous going into the negotiation, and so it can become quite tense. But if you can break the tension with humor, that develops relationship.
So could you give an example of perhaps humor
I
that
it
you've
just like wouldn't
used
be the
in a high
same.
stake
It's like,
negotiation yourself?
explaining a joke. It just doesn't work. It's
I
oh
know.
gosh. I can't think of a specific. Okay, I'll tell you one from the Jim Camp system. It's not one that I used, but it's an example
Okay.
of humor. Okay. So one of the things that Jim Camp talks about is that and actually Chris Voss talks about this too. There's a difference between acceptance and agreement. And there are different types of yes. Someone could say yes, but they could really mean no. So one of the ways that the tools that they suggest is to obtain yes in 3 different forms. Okay. So the example that Jim Camp gives is there was this lawyer and they were preparing to enter into a high stakes negotiation. And the room is full of people. He's actually the only lawyer in the and so that already makes people on edge, because if there's a lawyer there and they don't have a lawyer, then they feel at a deficit. They feel at a disadvantage. People see lawyers as threatening. As I mentioned, the principle is the 3 yeses, to obtain yes in 3 different forms. So this lawyer comes on, it's his turn to speak, and he says something along the lines of, and actually I really love using this too. Like my style of humor is like it's either like really dry, silly humor, or it's like self-deprecating humor. So this lawyer, he comes on and he's, listen guys, I know everyone here probably hates me because I'm a lawyer and lawyers are the absolute worst. But I just want to make sure with everyone, is it okay that I'm here? Is it okay? So he asks once and he's, hey, you guys don't have a lawyer, but I'm here. And I just want to make sure, are we good to proceed? That's number 2. And then the third one is, okay, it sounds like everyone is okay with the fact that I'm here, even though I'm a lawyer and I'm a bloodsucker. So, we're good to go. That's number 3. So that's an example of using humor as a way to, and paired with another tool, which is the 3 yeses. That would be an example. An example of one way that I've done something similar is I was on a call the other day and we were doing introduction. I was like, oh, I'm Amid. I'm a corporate lawyer, the evil kind, the worst kind. And then I was like, no, just kidding. Those are personal injury lawyers. But anyway, yeah. So yeah,
I like that. I like
self-deprecating
that.
humor, I think, can be really a great tool. Like make fun of yourself. It just shows that you don't take yourself that seriously. And during really high tension, that's very important because everyone is taking themselves very seriously.
What's one tough lesson you've learned from working on a major deal, and how has it shaped your approach to advising founders?
One tough lesson that I've learned there's so many lessons that you can learn. I think the most recent one, actually, this one is like just keeps getting learned over and over again, but it's like who you sell your company to, who you bring on as an investor, the strategy related to your investors really matters. It's a marriage. So if you don't like who you're selling your company to, if you don't have a good relationship with the person that you're offering interest in your company to as an investor, that's a very big problem. And so deeply understand they have this suggestion like in the world of relationships. Let's say you're a guy or a girl and you want a boyfriend or a girlfriend, you like think about who it is that like you want. Like that they are smart, they're funny, they go to church, they eat healthy food. Like they people usually create some sort of a list of what it is that they want their ideal partner to have. And in deals, having these sorts of understandings of who it is you want to do a deal with is also very important.
So it's also definitely putting yourself in a position where you're able to select these people that you do want to buy your company, and
That's right.
you're ensuring that you don't only have one option. I think this is a great topic to finish the podcast on. Thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing
Thank you for having me.
all
It's
your
been really
insights.
fun. Appreciate it.